Hello everyone, and welcome back to The Pulse. I am your host Connor Sundet, and on behalf of myself and the team here at Spokane Talks, we are very happy to have you with us. Thank you for tuning in, and we'll be right back after this.
This is Looms Day in Spokane. We got about 40 firefighters and their friends and family handing out 40,000 cups of water as the day goes by.
It's a very good opportunity to see the public and support them and help them out and cheer them on during Bloomsday.
It's one of the best things about Spokane is that we have these major events and the whole community comes together not just to participate but to volunteer and show that they really care about our city and making our city look great.
This type of an event really is emblematic of Spokane because so many people get involved. We have 50,000 people probably running this race. Always has been a very huge event.
Right now we're at the corner of Broadway and Nettleton. It's the last water station before the finish, so people are pretty much dehydrated by the time they get to us. They really need our water.
The water stations are a vital part, especially on warm days like today. It's real important that we have the volunteers to help with that. Without the volunteers, Bloomsday wouldn't exist.
All up and down the course, there are people that are involved in this celebration. It really is a celebration of what Spokane's all about.
At Wendell, you are respected, you are valued, and we have an experience tailored to fit your lifestyle.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Gina.
And we bought 3 cars from Wendell Motors. Throughout the day, I just kind of would get updates, texts, phone calls, and I was actually really impressed with how my wife was taken care of.
People should shop at Wendell because they make you feel like family.
For your tailored experience, come see us at Wendell at the Y or Wendell.com.
What happens when you pay your ABC membership?
We're glad you asked.
We educate the future workforce.
We keep you safe.
Negotiate the best insurance rates.
Organize networking events.
Implement 401k programs.
To keep our members open shop.
Offer discounts to make you profitable.
Each path to success is different,
but they all start and go through ABC.
We are ABC, Associated Builders and Contractors of the Inland Pacific,
where all the best builders and contractors locally unite.
When building a home or considering a major remodel, who are you going to choose? The Spokane Home Builders Association is an organization that works to elevate professionalism in the residential construction industry. We promote, protect, and educate for our community, building our community one home at a time. We are the Spokane Home Builders Association.
What's up, Spokane? I'm your host, Connor Sundet, here to keep you up to date on all things in our wonderful city. This week, the weather is going to stay at a nice cool 65 degrees, and this weekend it will creep into a warmer 70 to 80 degree range, but on Monday it will pull back and continue to drop throughout this week. I, for one, am more excited about the cooler temperatures as opposed to the record-breaking heat we experienced this summer. If you want to get some last-minute summer activities in, this is going to be the last weekend to do it. The Spokane Indians are behind in the championship series 2-0 behind the Eugene Emeralds, but it does appear to be some good news on the horizon. The Indians' home field, Avista Stadium, is to undergo a large renovation that may cost up to $200,000. The overhaul is long overdue as the field has gone through strikingly little change since its 1958 construction. The field has seen much use during its tenure and seen even more action since the team doubled the amount of games they play per season. The renovations will include tearing up the turf, replacing the infield dirt, and redoing the entire playing surface, although the biggest change has to do with the drainage system. The field has experienced flooding issues to this point, where the visitor dugout does get flooded in the middle of games. The organization is planning on various changes to improve on the system, including changing the dirt and leveling the field. And don't worry, the field will be ready in time for some great play in the 2022 season. For more local news, keep an eye out this October for our new program, The Local, hosted by myself and our own Kent Adams, where we keep you up to date on all things in our lovely community. It's going to be an awesome program and we'd love it if you joined us. Anyways, that's what's up, Spokane. We thank you for tuning in and we'll be right back with The Pulse.
Sheriff Ozzie talks with community leaders about issues in the public safety arena. Sponsored by River Ridge Hardware.
This is Sheriff Ozzie Knezovich with the Sheriff's Report. Today in the studio with me, I have Dr. David O'Brien with Multicare. We're going to talk about what we're facing with the pandemic here locally, the efforts that are being made to get the community through this. I really appreciate the time that you're taking to come and talk to people. I really think it's important that we have that frank, candid discussion with the public, so they understand, you know, this is what we're facing. This is truly the dynamic that we're seeing, and the patients levels that you're seeing. So, with that in mind, would you mind just kind of introduce yourself, give
Sure.
people an idea of who you are and what you do for the community?
Well, thank you, Sheriff, and thank you very much for inviting me to join you this morning. I really appreciate the chance to sit and talk about this important subject. I am Dr. David O'Brien. I am the Chief Executive for Multicare here in the Inland Northwest region. So I'm responsible for Valley Hospital, Deaconess Hospital, and Rockwood Clinic. And my background is in medicine, my whole career. I practiced family medicine for many years before I went into administrative and leadership work. And so it's really a privilege and an honor to work with really fantastic leaders at both hospitals and at Rockwood as we take on this major pandemic issues. And I also wanted to thank you not only for inviting me this morning, but to thank you and your whole department for your amazing commitment and work to care for our community. We share a similar mission in that regard.
Well, thank you. Can you give us an idea of what it's like inside the walls of the facilities that you're in charge of, and you know, what your staff are facing right now? What's it like for Multicare right now?
Yeah. Well, maybe just to set a little context, 6 weeks or so ago, we had 6 or 7 COVID patients in the hospital. Today, we're in the 70s and 80s. It's been an amazing spike in the increase in volume due to the Delta variant being very infectious. We have, really the hospital is very stressed right now. Our hospitals have had to open up COVID wards that are dedicated to caring for just COVID patients. We've had to, our ICUs are full of COVID patients. The ER is seeing record volumes of patients. Many of them are COVID. One of the interesting statistics and worrisome statistics is of the 60 to 70 patients we have in the hospital today, over 90% of them have not been vaccinated. So we're seeing a big flood of COVID patients in individuals that have not been vaccinated. But to your question about what is it like in the hospital, our doctors are working very, very hard. Our nursing staff and support staff are working extremely hard. It's very much a challenge because COVID patients get sick. If you're sick enough to be in the hospital, that means you need oxygen and you need intravenous therapy. And in the intensive care unit, it means you need either ventilatory support or other ways to try to help keep yourself oxygenated. This disease really deprives people of oxygen, and that's one of the main reasons to be in the hospitals, is to support that. I think one of the biggest challenges for our staff in the hospital, to get a feel for it, is that there is a lot of suffering. There is a lot of death. And our medical professionals, we're sort of hardwired to help people get better. I mean, that's what we're about. We're about taking patients that need our help and getting them well. And this virus is very hard to treat. and it's very hard to get people well, and we're seeing more deaths than we've ever seen, and it's very hard on the staff, psychologically, emotionally, and I worry about how that is impacting our staff. So it's a very tough environment, very stressful. I'm very proud of our staff and our doctors, nurses, and support staff. They tirelessly get up every morning and come in or work all night long, and are dedicated to taking care of all of our patients, our COVID patients and our non-COVID patients, because non-COVID disease continues and we still have those patients to take care of.
You mentioned the non-COVID patients. We're coming into flu season.
Yeah.
Some reports that I've been reading, this could be a very challenging flu season. The last time we had a challenging flu season a couple of years ago, we faced very similar challenges on our medical infrastructure. Now you add that and COVID on top of it. Are you concerned about this year's flu season?
I'm very concerned about the flu season. Healthcare, hospital care has some ebbs and flows. In a typical year pre-COVID, we would be always very busy in the wintertime with flu, increase in patients because it's winter, people are indoors, flu's a lot like COVID, very contagious. And then in the summer, we tend to have a little decrease in volumes in the hospital, and then it peaks. Well, we're not even in winter yet, and we're already full with COVID patients, and the flu season is going to get started. So by the way, I encourage everyone to get your flu vaccine as well as your COVID vaccine. So we are concerned that we're going to start seeing the normal spike in volume for flu on top of the already high volumes we're having with COVID. The interesting thing is last winter when we were really in lockdown and people were staying home and wearing masks and not going places, we had a very light flu season. So the things that transmit the flu are the same things that transmit COVID. It's a cough, a sneeze, something like that transmits the particles through your saliva that get aerosolized or droplet particles. So yeah, we're concerned about the flu season.
The Delta variant. The Delta variant has kind of changed the game a little for us.
Mm-hmm.
The older population at the beginning of the pandemic was considered very, very high risk. But we're now seeing a change in demographics. We're seeing the Delta virus starting to affect younger and younger people, to include children. Many reports, many studies I've seen, we're talking young children, not teenagers, we're talking 5, 6, 7, and younger even at times. What are we seeing here locally as far as the effect on our kids?
Well, the under 12 is the population we do not have currently have a vaccine for, although Pfizer the last couple of days has announced it has research that indicates they have a safe dosage for younger children, and that's going through the process, and hopefully that Pfizer vaccine will be available for children in the near future. But you're correct. Earlier in the pandemic, when the vaccine became available, many of our 50, 60, 70, and 80-year-olds flocked in, and we were doing 1,000 vaccination doses a day up at Deaconess back then. And so we've really done a good job vaccinating our older population. That demand has not been the same for the younger demographics. So we're starting to see, as I mentioned, of these 90+% people in the hospital with COVID, they're largely in the younger age group, not in the older age group. I would refer you to the Providence Children's Hospital here for some specifics, because we don't have inpatient care for children, but I'm hearing reports that they're seeing increased volumes of children admitted into the hospital with COVID, and that's very worrisome, especially now that schools have started and you know how kids are, they're not real good at, you know, hand hygiene and things that would kind of reduce the transmission. So very, very concerned about that.
You've mentioned the vaccine several times, both the flu vaccine, the COVID vaccine. There's a resistance out there to the vaccine. In my opinion, that resistance was created when we made a political football out of this pandemic. And if there's one thing I hope the future leaders of this country learned from this is never politicize a pandemic. This should have been a time that we locked hands together and devoted our attention to fighting the true enemy, which is this disease that is killing people. You know, that said, what's your advice? Because there's controversy here, there, and everything about, well, look how rapidly it was produced. Well, yeah, it was rapidly produced based on the technology that we've had for the last 40 years of creating these type of vaccines. And this has been one of the largest mass trials in the history of the world. Right. So we rapidly found side effects and everything else. What's your advice? How would you, if I wasn't vaccinated, and I am vaccinated, how would you try to convince me to get vaccinated?
Well, the science says that the vaccine is safe and it is extremely effective. And I mean, that's really what it all boils down to. It's safe and it's effective. People should not hesitate to get it as soon as they can if they're not vaccinated. You know, vaccine science in this country is the most advanced in the world, and we should be celebrating that we were able to produce this vaccine in such a short period of time, not being suspicious of it. It's a testament to the incredible advancements in medicine and in science and in pharmacology that we're able to produce at this level, this vaccine that is so effective and so safe. To me, it's short of miraculous. I'm very proud of our scientists and the capacity of our nation to be able to do this. Vaccine science goes back to Pasteur days. I mean, it's decades, centuries old, and it's become very, very advanced. You know, so I would encourage people to understand the science and do what the science tells you to do. This is not a time to be thinking about, be suspicious of your healthcare providers. I would encourage people to go talk to your doctor and get your questions answered. Your doctor knows the most about you and your particular situation, whether you have other illnesses and things of that nature, and the importance of you getting vaccinated.
I have to agree with you as far as the pride we should see coming, especially from this nation, in that if you take a look at the moonshot, that was a phenomenal feat. What was done with this vaccine in months rivals that great accomplishment. And it was a partnership. People forget that all those people, that companies that produced this vaccine actually got together. They shared details, they shared the ideas. Something that rarely happens, because let's face it, they're in business. Proprietary knowledge and everything else. But they actually dropped all of that. They dropped that, and they said, what is the best for the people, quite frankly, of not just this nation, but the world? How do we counter this deadly disease? And they did. They did it very rapidly. Our leadership in government gave a vision and said, let's do this as quickly as possible to save as many lives as possible. And I guess that's the part that really I struggle with, in that now we have this debate about, you know, and quite frankly, it's not divided on political lines. There are people on both the left and right that will not get this vaccine because of the politics behind it. And I've received that phone call from my daughter last November when she came down with COVID.
Wow.
And Dad, they're talking about putting me on a ventilator.
Scary.
And that was a very long night. Myself, I came down with COVID last January, and took all the precautions possible, but still came down with COVID. It was 90 days before I could get the vaccine. After it finally came out, because I had been COVID positive. One of the things you always hear is, well, if I had COVID, I have to have the antibodies. Why do I need the vaccine?
Yeah, well, the science indicates that you will mount an immune response if you get a native disease, if you catch it. But it's not as robust. And interestingly, it's not as robust as the immune response that you'll get from the vaccine. So we really encourage people, even if you've had COVID, after a period of time, you should go ahead and get the vaccine series to fully vaccinate yourself to further protect you. You know, the rapidity with which this was developed is based on years and years of science that had already been built and created. It's not like we just started from scratch and say, hey, we need a vaccine. We know how to make vaccines. Right. We just now know how to make one that really is specific to this virus.
You and I have been working on this issue pretty much nonstop since last fall, really, because we pulled everybody together. Got ready for the second spike that was predicted in January, February, and standard crisis of care is one of the big topics that we talked about. Now, can you explain to folks what that entails and why that is really, when we hit that level, the system is really at jeopardy at that point? Because you hear it in the news, you hear it, but I don't think people really understand what that level means.
Well, in healthcare and in medicine, we have this concept of a standard of care. So you have a heart attack patient, you want to take care of that patient according to a certain standard, and that standard is well understood among medical professionals. Crisis standards of care means that pretty much goes out the window. And you invoke crisis standard of care when you do not have enough resources to take care of everybody that comes to your facility. And it's often, right now, it's really not a function of the building, it's a function of staff. We can't admit a patient in the hospital if let's have a doctor, a nurse, respiratory therapist, pharmacist, support staff, all the teamwork it takes to take care of a patient. When that gets overwhelmed, you reach a point where somebody has to make a decision who's going to get what resources you have and who's not going to get those resources. Our colleagues, unfortunately in Idaho, are in crisis standard of care today, and they're making these kinds of decisions. We are stressed in Spokane area. We're not in crisis right at standard of care at this point, but Sheriff, it really wouldn't take too much to tip us over. So we're very concerned about never wanting to put our doctors and nurses in a position of saying, I'm sorry, we can't care for you. That's probably the most traumatic thing a healthcare professional could ever say to somebody is, I'm sorry, I can't take care of you, because we go to school and we dedicate our lives to caring for other people. We always have our patient's best interest at heart. But to be into that kind of a situation, and then it's really hard for us to figure this out because there is a way to prevent it by taking the vaccine. And if everyone who's eligible would take the vaccine, we wouldn't even be having this conversation right now. We'd be, out having coffee and having a good time. So that's really kind of like the sort of the agonizing piece that I think our providers have to struggle with.
I can tell you that if things were slightly different, we wouldn't be facing what we currently are facing. And your and I, night's sleep might be a little bit better because this topic does keep you awake at times. You talked about the crisis standard of care. The implications of that are elective surgeries, and maybe not so elective surgeries in my opinion, because you really have to weigh, can that cancer patient that has the tumor in their lung wait long enough before it spreads to the brain so we can get through this crisis. That has to be a very difficult decision for a doctor to make.
Yeah. Thank you for pointing that out. That's very challenging. We have suspended elective surgical procedures and only doing emergencies because we have taken all of our staff in the operating rooms and redeployed them out onto the medical floors to take care of medical patients that are inundating our hospital. And in fact, our surgeons have said, hey, we can help. They're actually helping round on medical patients. And so there's a lot of our resources being devoted away from elective surgeries and preventive medicine procedures. And that's exactly what you're saying is we worry, is somebody's disease going to progress during this suspension of these procedures? Is somebody's preventative test going to not pick up a cancer early like it could if we could be able to manage that more aggressively and earlier? So we're concerned that we will see more disease later in the year than we would have if we weren't having to do this. But that's one of the things we have to do in order to take care of the person who's standing there in front of you and can't breathe. I mean, we just have to take care of them as more of an emergency.
A lot of people, because of the stress that's been placed on the medical system right now, could you give some maybe guidance on when I should go to the ER, when I should maybe go to urgent care, or when I should maybe just see my doc and get treatment that way? Because I think a lot of people are kind of confused, and I've actually heard people go, "Wow, I don't want to clog the ER up, so I'm not going to go." But they waited that touch too long, and I've actually seen people die.
Yeah, we saw this earlier in the pandemic when we were first starting to get all of this figured out and people were afraid to go to the hospital. The first most important thing is if you're having chest pain, symptoms of a stroke, or some, medical emergency, you should go to the ER. I would implore you to go to the ER. We will find a way to get those emergencies taken care of. We don't want people sitting home with a heart attack for 2 or 3 days. Most of these kinds of illnesses, these kind of events have a short window where you can do an intervention, and you want to do that early on, not 2 days later where we can't do anything for you. But if you have a minor ailment, you're worried you sprained or fractured or sprained your ankle, or you have a skin infection or something not that serious, that's where the urgent care can come in. And for other things, you should always rely on I'm a family doctor, so I'm a strong believer that the first point of contact should always be your family doctor or whoever's on call for them to get your medical advice. But don't stay home with serious symptoms. come and let us get it checked out.
We have about 3 minutes left. I'm going to turn that 3 minutes over to you to cover anything that you think needs to be covered that we didn't necessarily touch on, because we really do need people to sit back, drop all the rhetoric, drop all the Facebook, social media, anger and hate that I see out there. And folks, there are people that are exploiting this for political means, and I find it probably one of the most disgusting things I've seen in my political career is to watch people hold rallies and give false information. That is tantamount to evil in my opinion. But 3 minutes, what would you tell people?
Well, I'll speak to you as a physician. Healthcare is a calling for us. We go into healthcare to help other people. Years and years of training, decades of training in some cases. Our patients trust us when they're having their babies. They trust us when they're having a heart attack or a stroke. They trust us to take care of their cancers. I mean, we take care of our patients from birth to death. And we do that always with what's the best interest for our patients. And so I would ask people to be careful where you get your information. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And please consult your healthcare professionals and providers who have dedicated their lives to caring for you and would never give you advice to take a vaccine that's going to hurt you or to do something that's going to hurt you. Our whole profession is dedicated to caring for people. Universally, healthcare professionals will tell you, get the vaccine. It's the best hope for yourself, your children, your family, your community, and ultimately it's the best hope for the whole world. And that's what I'd ask you to do, is come and ask a healthcare professional or a public health official that has also dedicated, their whole life is dedicated toward taking care of the public. I think that would be my greatest plea, is to get good information, make a good decision that works for you, and let's get this pandemic under control so we can get back to normal life.
I'd have to echo that. Folks, I was talking with my wife the other day, and she said, well, okay, what's up? Because she said, very quiet at home. And I said, well, it's because of what I'm seeing and how we change this dynamic. And she said, and how to convince people to get a vaccine that's going to potentially save their lives. And she said, well, why did you get a vaccine? And I went, well, and she said, no, tell me why you got the vaccine. I went, okay, well, I looked at it as a duty to get the vaccine so I could stay in the saddle doing the job that these people elected me to do. Very much the reason I took the vaccines when I was in the military, when they sent me overseas. That, and I trust my medical profession. I trust the leaders that brought this to us. And I look at this as one of the greatest accomplishments that, as a nation, that we've done that's been totally overlooked. And she said, well, why don't you tell people that then?
Yeah, that's great.
The wisdom of wives.
Yeah.
And I look at it that way. Folks, Dr. O'Brien is spot on. What we accomplished as a nation together gave us a vaccine that can stop this pandemic and give us a sense of normalcy back. COVID's going to be around for a long time now. It's all how we learn to deal with it and how we learn to manage it.
Right.
We've been given the tools to manage it. Let's take those tools, use them, and take pride in what we accomplished as a nation. This is Sheriff Ozzie Knezowicz with the Sheriff's Report. Have a great day.
Hi, at River Ridge Hardware on the corner of Garland and Driscoll, 2803 West Garland, with a wheelbarrow full of deals. I have antifreeze for all your summer toys. Keep them running for next year, $3.99. I got rakes for all those leaves that are coming down, $7.97. And from plastic to the metal rakes, same price, $7.97. I have 2 different shovels to pick from, both $7.97. Come on down, get those shovels now while they last. Also, bird feed for the winter to keep those birds nice and fat for the spring, $14.97 for a 40-pound bag of bird seed. We also are selling good bird feeders that keep the squirrels out and to choose from. And not to mention, the wheelbarrow's on sale too for $79.97. Come on down. Now, all of our greenery that we have out here now is still 30% off. Get it while it lasts. Not to mention the yard art is 20% off. Good time to start shopping for Christmas for your mom. Get that yard art, put it in your closet, bring it out during Christmas. She'll love you for it. Come on by at River Ridge Hardware, corner of Garland and Driscoll, 509-328-0915, or shop us online at riverridgehardware.com.
Contact us today to learn how PowerView automation makes everyday living effortless.
Why are housing prices going up so fast in the Spokane area? Hello, I'm Darren Watkins with the Spokane Association of Realtors. It's a simple case of supply and demand. Since 2010, we have seen the number of available homes on the market fall dramatically, from 2,348 in January of 2010 to only 164 per month in 2021. That's a 94% reduction in our housing supply. The result? Housing prices began to climb rapidly in 2015, with a median home price in Spokane County of $179,000. That same home today would cost you $380,000. That is, if you can even find a home to buy.
For the last, I'd say at least 10 to 15 years, I think we've been underbuilding. We've seen this crisis coming, and nothing's being done to fix it.
There are no homes to purchase. When there is a home that comes up that buyers like, you're up against 20 plus other buyers who are making an offer on the same house.
Adding to the crisis, thousands of families are fleeing major West Coast cities such as Seattle, Portland, and Los Angeles. Among the top destinations, Spokane, Washington.
When you talk about an out-of-town buyer, they've sold that home in a coastal market, let's say, a Seattle, Portland, San Francisco, LA, take your pick, for $1.5 million, and they come to Spokane and can replace that thing and be in a nicer home for $500,000.
When there are 20 plus offers on a property that they feel like they don't have a chance. So now they're having to look at homes far lower than they're even qualified for, because they have to compete with cash deals or something that goes so much further over the list price, and it's extremely defeating for clients.
The answer is clear. We need more homes immediately, especially for entry-level workforce housing. Every day that we wait, those costs are just going to keep going up and up.
Up next, join us for Forthright, our new program with Sue Lani Madsen.
Welcome to Forthright, and this is the first edition of Emails to the Author, following up on a column previously published in the Spokesman Review. This column had a headline online of Healthy Boundaries, published Thursday, August 19th, 2021. The Boston Tea Party was not about tea. It was a political protest against perceived overreach by an out-of-touch monarch into the affairs of individuals without their consent. A small group decided they had been pushed one step too far and tangibly registered their objections by brewing a shipload's worth of tea in Boston Harbor. Likewise, the pushback on COVID-driven mandates is not primarily about mRNA vaccines. It's a Boston Tea Party moment, when an overbearing executive branch of government has pushed a significant number of public employees and healthcare professionals one step too far. This column is not going to attempt to state the evidence for or against any individual vaccination decision. There are clearly benefits to the community and risks to individuals, as there are in so many individual choices. My personal choice was to seek out mRNA vaccination, a decision made after careful consideration. While I am happy to provide information, I will not attempt to shame or argue others into making the same choice. And I don't want the government threatening public servants and healthcare workers on my behalf with loss of livelihood and profession if they don't allow that most personal of boundaries, their skin, to be penetrated by government edict. The right to bodily privacy discovered in the 14th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution by the Supreme Court in the Roe v. Wade decision surely applies. As I've made clear in columns on the pro-abortion versus pro-life debate, I don't want to see abortion prohibited by legislation, but to apply the same right to bodily privacy to both the unborn child and the mother. That's an issue on which I draw a line, recognizing it means dealing with the ethically fraught conflict between the interests of the unborn child and his or her mother while respecting the autonomy of both. We empower legislators to debate and pass laws within constitutional boundaries, which may require or restrict actions by individuals in the name of community good. Driving on the right side of the road, using your headlights after dark, prohibiting drinking and driving, mandatory motorcycle helmets in some states, but not others, where communities have judged individual freedom outweighs community benefit or pressure from insurance companies. Some decisions we leave to individuals in the name of freedom. The greatest quantity of negative emails I have ever received following a column was triggered by suggesting bicyclists should wear something reflective at night to better avoid collisions with cars. You would have thought I was mandating a scarlet letter S for smug. I had apparently crossed a boundary with a Sons of Liberty subset of commuting cyclists. Individuals are free to choose many risky behaviors having community consequences. According to the CDC, as reported by CNBC News, nearly 80% of those who have been hospitalized, needed a ventilator, or died from COVID-19 have been overweight or obese. Over 42% of the U.S. population was considered obese in 2018. Not merely overweight with a body mass index of 25 to 30, but obese with a BMI of more than 30. The well-researched route to drastically reduce the severity of illness due to COVID and to avoid overtaxing hospital systems would be to reduce all Americans' BMI to less than 30. Instead of wagging fingers at strangers for not wearing masks, civic busybodies could eye the line at the bakery and say, "Sorry, ma'am, no donuts for you." Since we're still calling it an emergency, we could resurrect World War II-era food ration cards. And company picnics would sure be fun, with HR enforcers insisting, "Put down that second hamburger or you're fired." Bonus benefits would include reduced strain on our healthcare system due to other obesity-related health impacts, making the community healthier as a whole and increasing our community resilience to new virus variants. Obesity is linked to poverty and lack of access to healthy foods, an equity issue. Instead of issuing EBT cards to people living in urban and rural food deserts, sign folks up for the meal prep kit subscriptions that provide healthy foods and an appropriate number of calories each day, perhaps with a one-size-fits-all menu dictated by experts. Would any of those mandates cross your boundary? Or do individuals have the right and the responsibility to decide what goes into their bodies based on all of the available evidence, their sincerely held beliefs, and their individual health concerns? Requirements to be fully vaccinated for SARS-CoV-2 by October 18th or be terminated from their jobs pits the interests of individuals in determining their personal risk against the interest of the community in mitigating overall risk. King Inslee has been operating under executive edict in a state of emergency for 18 months, unchecked by the legislature. Instead of meeting in a Boston tavern, over 17,600 people are meeting on a Facebook group called Washington State Citizens Against the mRNA Injection Mandate and reassuring each other they are not alone in rejecting forced vaccination, even if it means losing their jobs. Where do you draw the line? What government mandate would be a step too far for you? Responses to that column ran about evenly pro and con. Naysayers zeroed in on vaccines and went straight to, people will die, it will be all your fault for not demanding vaccination. Like this gentleman. I have 2 very young grandchildren who cannot get vaccinated yet. They will as soon as it is allowed. In the meantime, people whose freedom is being threatened are endangering them. Rhetoric like yours only served to inflame them. They were all vaccinated against polio and smallpox, which were less threatening to people than this vaccine. You need to get educated about the real consequences of this virus and quit with the freedom nonsense. So his remarks shaped what became a template for responding. You missed my point, John. Although this has become such an emotional topic, I rather expected that reaction would not be uncommon. I'm not going to engage in arguments over the long-term and short-term effectiveness of mRNA vaccines, individual risk, and community benefit. I've made it clear what my decision on vaccination has been, and I'm certain if SARS-CoV-2 was as contagious as chickenpox, which it isn't, and as deadly as smallpox, which it isn't, most people currently reluctant to accept vaccination would make a different risk-benefit analysis. The question remains, what mandate from the government would you reject? Where is your boundary between individual liberty and submitting to authority in the name of protecting the community from some perceived harm? And then there were those who were triggered by referring to our governor as King Inslee, a nickname that has been bandied about for well over a year, like this critic. I take it from your characterization of the governor as a king that you do not think he should assume emergency powers, or at least for not as long as he has, without some sort of legislative authorization. Theoretically, I agree with you, but it's exceedingly difficult for the legislature to craft legislation that addresses a moving target, which the fight against COVID most certainly is. What the defenders of King Inslee continuing to govern by mandate fail to see is how regular consultation with the legislature was a missed opportunity to build unity. Not just talking to a few members of his own party, but an inclusive outreach to legislators representing diverse points of view across the state. It's entirely possible all the same decisions would have been made, but they would have had a broad base of support, and we really would all be in this together. I always answer emails from readers, if only to thank them for taking time to send feedback. But what I really enjoy is when that feedback turns into a civil conversation. That provides a glimmer of hope for the country. So this email from a reader began what turned into a longer and satisfying conversation. She writes, I enjoy reading your conservative commentaries in the review and sometimes even agree with you. However, today's article equating being overweight with not being vaccinated is missing the point. The vast majority of Americans are upset with those who refuse to get the COVID vaccine because they don't want the government telling them what to do, and they don't seem to care what their actions will, as a whole, lead to many, many more deaths of not only those close to them, but throughout society. It may also allow even more dangerous viruses to emerge. If not getting a vaccine only puts the person not getting the vaccine in danger, then there wouldn't be as much need for mandates. She goes on to add that those who are not getting vaccines are adding to society's cost of health care, insurance, and economic well-being, whereas an overweight person is in most cases only affecting their own economic situation. I'm sure you're aware of these costs to society due to people not getting a very effective and safe vaccine. You should write a commentary on the cost to society of individuals not getting vaccinated. But you know, I could also write a commentary on the cost to society of people not taking care of their health in general. While I disagree on this with this reader's conclusions about the cost to society of obesity and unhealthy lifestyles, that's a debate for another day. We did go on to enjoy a civil discussion on how we should deal with individual choices when the consequences affect others, including taxpayers footing the bill for medical care, leading to her response to setting healthy boundaries between the individual and government. She goes on to say, you ask a good question. When am I willing to accept government mandates? I would say when those mandates are keeping me from hurting others. My overeating will damage my health, but it won't affect anyone else's health or finances. I drink, but I don't drive after drinking. I know that dangers not only myself, but others. And finally, I am a follower of Christ, and He and the Holy Spirit give me compassion for the other. So I try to do what is good for the other, in particular the poor and the hurting of the world. A person who follows Christ will naturally want to keep others from getting sick from COVID and set aside their political views for the good of others. Why some don't is beyond me. She concludes with, I pray for Americans to gain wisdom and compassion in all things. It turned out that we had common ground in Christ and a shared concern for the poor and marginalized in the world, even if we drew our boundaries in different places. Then there's the fan mail from people who feel intimidated by progressive narratives dominating media and thank me for speaking up on their behalf. These are the folks who picked up on the theme of individual autonomy and appreciated seeing an op-ed on that principle and on the scope of government. Like this writer who said, thank you for your article. Thank you for being bold enough to speak to the issue at hand and not just spew the standard line that all other journalists seem to be taking. Bodily autonomy is our last sovereign right and is definitely the line I have drawn in the sand. The beauty of this country is that we do have free choice to live our lives how we choose with all the attached consequences of those choices. I'm certain you may receive some backlash from this article. Yes, I did. But for one, applaud you for looking at the bigger picture and embracing personal responsibility for guiding one's life. In a fairy tale world, everyone would make those wise decisions which have such profound effects on our health. It is a step too far that government feels the need to interject its opinion on how best to maintain health. The question is, how do we protect ourselves from those who think they know better and who do, in emergency orders, have the absolute power to enact those orders? Thank you for giving voice to many who feel the same, respectful of all choices people make. From another regular correspondent who thoughtfully raised some other issues, an argument could be made that becoming obese does not directly endanger others as transmission of COVID does, but maybe a stronger case could be made for alcohol consumption, which can and does endanger others if not better regulated. The issue that underlies all of these scenarios is why some things are high-profile national urgency while others are not. And that's an excellent question. We have to ask ourselves why some issues become major, become pressured, become subject to emergency powers, and some do not. My writer goes on to say, is it a social experiment being used to foster a basis for socialism replacing our republic? And why has this issue taken on narrative qualities where debate is seen as unpatriotic or stupid, statistics are provided after manipulation or not provided at all, and where legitimate questions are mocked or not allowed to be asked? Why is most of the media compliant in pushing the narrative? It is not just that many have been pushed one step too far. Some of us worry about why we are being pushed at all. What is happening here and why argues for possible carryover into many other facets of our lives, and that is really scary. It was a column about boundaries and setting those healthy boundaries, and we're seeing that argument play out right now. One of the plaintiffs in the lawsuit recently filed in Walla Walla County against the state over the vaccine mandates is a friend and neighbor. We may lose him and as many as 215 of his colleagues out of a Washington State Patrol workforce of 1,000 over a boundary pushed too far. I hope you've enjoyed this edition of Emails to the Author as much as I have. Reading some of the reactions that never make it to the letters to the editor will be a regular feature of Forthright. The emails on this column surpass the bicycle column. I knew discussing boundaries in the current fearful atmosphere would ruffle more than a few feathers, but that's what you get when you speak forthrightly.
The economy is getting stronger, banks are lending again, and interest rates are at historic lows. Now is a great time to buy your dream home. The caring and knowledgeable professionals at Homes for You have been helping people just like you for over 20 years. They take the time to listen to what you want and will help you find just the right home in Washington or Idaho. Real estate is what we do at Homes for You, 928-5782, or visit online at homes4uspokane.com.
Hi, at River Ridge Hardware on the corner of Garland and Driscoll, 2803 West Garland, with a wheelbarrow full of deals. I have antifreeze for all your summer toys. Keep them running for next year, $3.99. I got rakes for all those leaves that are coming down, $7.97. And from plastic to the metal rakes, same price, $7.97. I have 2 different shovels to pick from, both $7.97. Come on down, get those shovels now while they last. Also, bird feed for the winter to keep those birds nice and fat for the spring, $14.97 for a 40-pound bag of bird seed. We also are selling good bird feeders that keep the squirrels out and to choose from. And not to mention, the wheelbarrow's on sale too for $79.97. Come on down. Now, all of our greenery that we have out here now is still 30% off. Get it while it lasts. Not to mention the yard art is 20% off. Good time to start shopping for Christmas for your mom. Get that yard art, put it in your closet, bring it out during Christmas. She'll love you for it. Come on by at River Ridge Hardware, corner of Garland and Driscoll, 509-328-0915, or shop us online at riverridgehardware.com.
The world has changed a lot in 50 years, and Kimley Haygood has changed with it. We still provide our customers with the highest level of service, whether it's financing, construction management, property management and maintenance, leasing, or sales. Our team is here to help you make the best decisions with your real estate. Weather in the inland Northwest can wear you down. And if your gutters are in poor condition or you do not have gutters, you could suffer damage that could cost a fortune to fix. Rainman Seamless Rain Gutters has almost 30 years of professional experience in serving the inland Northwest region and strives to ensure customer service that is second to none, from the time you call to the end of the project.
Join us now as Connor talks with Tom Bross about his new book, Don't Call Me Jupiter.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another version of The Pulse. I'm with Tom Bross here, local author here in Spokane, here to interview about his book, Don't Call Me Jupiter. So welcome, Tom. Welcome to the program.
Yes. Thanks for having me, Connor. I'm really excited to be here.
I'm glad that you're here. How are you doing today? I mean, overall, pretty good?
I'm going to steal a line from George Carlin and tell you that I'm moderately neato, just because it's good to mix it up occasionally.
Oh, yeah. Definitely good to mix up the pot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of pots, oh my goodness. I just skimmed through your book and lots of things. So let's just begin. Tell us about yourself. Where did you grow up and how did it influence your book?
Good question. So my family started in the Midwest. That's the heartland of America. And it's called the Heartland of America because there's no brains there. I'm just kidding. I have lots of family in Ohio and I still love the Midwest. But the joke is people move to either coast. And when my parents got divorced, that's kind of what happened. My dad took off and went to Boston to start his own travel writing business.
Okay.
He became a successful travel writer and photographer, went all over the world. My mom moved west. I think she was attracted to San Francisco in the summer of '69 and the summer of love that was coming up. So they moved to opposite coasts. And I ended up living in San Francisco and a plethora of other places all over, mostly Northern California. From San Francisco, we went to a little town called Shingle Springs that I say in the book was named after a diseased water source. It was the complete opposite of living in the heart of San Francisco, but of course we loved it. From San Francisco, we moved to Fair Oaks, California, which is part of Sacramento, and then eventually to Davis, where we stayed for about 6 years. And that kind of led to where I thought was the right point to start the book. There was a dramatic event that happened in 1974 where my mother all of a sudden announced that we were going to go live with our God family. Lots of people have a godmother or father, but we happen to have a whole entire God family because my mom and her best friends had synchronistic kids. So Peggy had a girl, my mom had a girl. Peggy had another girl, my mom had another girl. Peggy had Danny, my mom had me. Peggy had Annalisa, my mom had Molly. So we kind of grew up with this family in Cincinnati, and then we joined them in San Francisco. And they're a big part of the book as well.
Fascinating, fascinating. And I relate to that part of the book too. My mother and her 3 other friends, all without being planned, had 4 children total near around the same time. And my best friend and I, his name is Dallas, were born legitimately 20 days apart from each other. So I get the synchronicity. It was an accident though, so that it wasn't planned. You know,
right.
What I'm saying. But fascinating. And I read right after you guys moved, your mom started working in this cook shop, bakery.
Yeah.
Right?
So, we did complain about living in Davis all the time. It's flat. I think when you're a certain age, no matter where you're at, you're not happy where you are, and you sort of got that green grass, syndrome where you're like, oh, it'll be better wherever I go. And San Anselmo was far more interesting as far as the people we came in contact with. Peggy was very well connected. She knew people like Sly Stone. So
Really?
my mom and Peggy worked on projects in his recording studio, and we came in contact with a lot of people that, have become well known. And it was chaos living with all in one house with all our god sisters and brothers, but it was also an extension of our family. And even though I got off to a really rough start in San Anselmo, I started to like it more than Davis. And it was about that time that my mother, for some reason, said, that's it, we're heading back to Davis. So she kind of plucked us each out of school and never really gave us an explanation why. It's a mystery to this day. But that's kind of where the book starts, is we returned to Davis, and my brother and my sisters, they're all able to stay with their friends in different houses. But I get stuck in Cliff's garage, which was one of my mother's ex-boyfriends.
Okay.
And so I'm pretty miserable, and it just felt like the right place to start the book because there's plenty of time in the dank, cold garage to reminisce about my family's history.
And it's definitely a fascinating one. I mean, your parents getting divorced, right, and moving to separate coastlines. I mean, like that must be just hard on a kid, especially during the time of the 60s and 70s too. I mean, I could not imagine going
Well,
through
kids are so adaptable. So the weird thing is when you're a kid, until you start comparing yourself to other families and other lifestyles, you just kind of figure this is the way it is and you do the best you can. And for the most part, I never felt like we were poor or we had less than other people, but I did start to notice we were different. And I became very observant and would compare my family to my friends. And I literally started taking notes, knowing that I want to write a book one day because we're dealing with some crazy shit here. And it's not the kind of stuff other kids typically have to encounter. One of the, we weren't always hippies. I mean, hippies, most people become hippies. There's some kind of transition.
they're not like right off the bat, I'm
If
right
you're
on board.
born on a commune or a whole earth festival,
that's one thing.
Right, you're going to start your whole life as a hippie. We started out in the Midwest and we were incredibly straight. We went to church every Sunday. We were very buttoned down. We had kind of the all-American life in suburbia, extremely conservative. We happened to be chosen to be the model family for the oral vaccination that was developed by Dr. Sabin. And so our picture appeared in the paper, and there's a photo of it on the cover of the book and also inside the book. And I felt that was important to show that, we went through this extreme change. And that was really the running theme with my mother. She was all about change. And that message still influences me to this day.
So how did you change, and what sort of changes specifically occurred within your family?
I think even in San Francisco, Peggy was allowed to be more than a hippie than my mother was. So we got taken to a lot of demonstrations. We got to see some really wild stuff as kids. Peggy was very empowering about, you have the right to question authority. You have the right to protest. You have the right to do what you think is right for humanity, and no government can get in your way. So it was nice to have that message from Peggy. My mom was married to a very conservative. She happened to have an affair with our next door neighbor in Ohio. He followed us out to San Francisco, and they had a kind of a secret wedding. And then my stepbrother came along a year later. So John was he didn't like the hippie thing. He wasn't about free speech or anything. He hung on to classic values. So the hippiness sort of had to leak out. And you could see it when John wasn't at home, in the kind of music my mom would play, how she dressed. When she was with Peggy, she was a lot different than she was with John. John left 5 of his own kids behind in Ohio, and my mom already had 4 kids at the time. So he wasn't really into kids at all. And he was a really kind of a hard stepdad to have around.
Right. And I mean, without relationships with your father is great and whatnot, but then when you have the divorce and then you have a stepfather come into your, try to step in that fatherly role, it can be difficult probably.
I'm sure.
For any children or any child.
Yeah, it couldn't have been easy for John, but I don't want to give him too much credit either, because we were good kids. I look back and I wasn't a rule breaker. I was into doing good at school. All my brothers and sisters were getting good grades. We were good kids, but he didn't give us the time of day. And basically, he didn't give us attention unless we did something wrong, at which point he felt it was his job to...
Necessary as a father figure.
More as an authoritarian. Okay. So there's lots of stories in the book about how living with John was really difficult and how he was so much different than my mom.
Why don't you give one of those stories for us?
When we were living in Shingle Springs, which is just outside of Placerville in Northern California, in the foothills of the Sierras, we lived on this beautiful ranch. It was called the Diamond D Ranch, and there was a feral cat there, and my mom's a nature lover, and she loves all animals, and she befriended this cat that we still couldn't even touch as kids. It wouldn't come near us, but she was able to feed it, and then the cat had a litter of kittens in the barn, and she wanted us to come out there and witness the birth of these cats so we could see the meaning of life. Now you fast forward about 3 weeks or less, and John decided that he needed to drown the kittens to teach us a lesson that life is harsh, that there's not always food for everybody, that one person can't provide for a whole litter, which was crazy. But he ended up putting the cats in a sack. He let us pick one to keep, and then he drowned the rest of the kittens. Oh my God. So you have this contrast between this sort of mom who's dying to be more in touch with nature and this authoritarian father figure that was really harsh. Yes, there's a few good things that come out. We had structure while John was around. We had impeccable table manners. I think the nicest compliment he ever gave me was, you're learning to use a fork better. I was petrified to eat salads around him because I was like, do I stab or do I scoop? And I always knew he was watching and that we were never good enough for him. I would like to add that years later, I invited John to a Thanksgiving dinner, and he actually apologized for being so rough on us kids. It was a minor move on his part, but much appreciated. It didn't make up for all the shit he did while we were growing up, but I still felt like it showed some evolution in his maturity as a man to look back and maybe go, maybe I didn't need to be so hard on them.
Yeah, I mean, the ability for humans to look back and to learn upon the mistakes that they made is something that I wish everyone would do. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, we don't. And
I've made so many mistakes. I should be a lot smarter than I am, but I do take it upon myself to not be depressed by them, but look at them as growing experiences.
Yeah. And I think that's what everyone should do. Is like, oh, I made a mistake 5 years ago. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Own up to it. Yep. Learn from it. That's the most important thing, and move on.
Exactly.
And one of the things that my sister, my older sister, did to me when I was younger was whenever I would chew gum or whenever I would chew food, she would look at me straight in the eyes and be like, chew with your mouth shut. And it just criticized me over and over and over again about to where the point where I did learn when I was 6 or 7 years old, I would chew with my mouth shut. Like when I do whatever. And to this day now, when I look at my younger sister, when we're eating together as a family, she chews out loud. I look at her and I'm like, chew with your mouth shut.
So you grew up with sisters too?
Yeah, I have 2 sisters, a younger one and an older one, and then an older brother. The oldest is the brother. So
I have a younger brother who came along after. It's John's son, but 2 older sisters and 1 younger. And I really liked that. I felt like it was great. We were all close in age. I'm really good in the kitchen, but John would never let me help out with anything mechanical. So to this day, I'm not as mechanically as inclined as I'd like to be.
And siblings are definitely, I think, important in any family because they teach us the important stuff that they've gone through, kind of like the parents, but we're so much closer in age that we can grow upon each other, and we can
practical stuff too. Chris would tell me, you can't dance like that. You will scare women away, and she would, go, you got to do this. Bring it in, Tom, bring it in. And just about how to talk to girls, at that awkward age when you're starting to get interested in girls. I had sisters I could bounce ideas off, and most of the time they'd roll their eyes, but eventually they'd come around and go, this is what you need to do.
You learn the moves in order to get the girl, And let's actually jump to today. How did you get to Spokane, and what's your life like today?
I had a sister that was living in Carywood, who's up in Sandpoint now.
Okay.
And I was in the Bay Area and working in marketing and advertising, but we'd vacation up here, and I loved the area right away. I had 2 really young kids at the time and thought, boy, I'd like to raise my kids somewhere else. Typical, tired of the rat race story in the Bay Area. But I thought, Spokane, it's so cute. It's a cute, darling little town, but I didn't think there were any advertising agencies up here. But it turns out there was an ad market, and I was in a real specific niche, and there was an agency up here that was familiar with my work. So I was able to get the family up here, and I've become sort of a 4-season person that loves to visit California, but would never want to live there again.
Naturally.
Yeah.
I mean, for right now too, especially the housing market there, unless you're very wealthy, it's not a good housing market to be in the state.
When I first came up here, I was one of those Californians that people were like, oh, we hate you. You're driving up the property value, all this stuff. Well, now I'm one of those Spokanites that sees Californians and other West Siders and Portlanders come up here, and I'm like, oh,
you're driving up the prices.
The locals can't afford to buy a house now and all that.
Yeah,
but
the median price within Spokane has just jumped.
Yeah.
I mean, dramatic. I think the last time I saw a report on it, it was like $380,000 for the median price here in Spokane. And it's like, for Spokane of all places, like,
salaries haven't exactly kept up with that.
No, it hasn't. It definitely needs to change, and hopefully it will with the economy, and so goes on to the way it needs to be. So, any last words you want to say about your book or the?
Well, Don't Call Me Jupiter is a series, and I don't know. As an author, just when you know that your words, all that work, all that heart, all that energy you put into it.
18 years you were talking about.
Yeah, it took me an extremely long time to write this book. So I always knew I wanted to write a book. Originally, it was going to be called The Yellow Bus. Our yellow bus is on the cover. But lo and behold, something threw our family for a very dramatic curve in 1996. And it gave the right platform to launch the book from. Why didn't I start writing it then? I had my hands full with other things. Life throws a lot at you sometimes. It seems to come in waves. But I never let go of the idea that I was going to write a book. So I kept plugging away at it. Yeah, it took about 18 years total to get to that point. I split the book up because initially it was really, really long.
It was going to be one
really long book, and as a not known author, I think it would have been a stretch to ask people to read a 600 or 700 page book. So actually, I think it has more impact that it's been broken into 3. The first one came out at the very end of February, and I love getting reviews on it. Goodreads is a great place to leave a review, so is Amazon if you buy it there. I took it upon myself to do a audio version of the book, and I read it, which was a real learning experience. I got about halfway through before I really found my groove. And then I thought, I got to reread the first half because I wasn't that good at it. Not that I'm great at it now, but I got a lot better, like anything else. The second book is scheduled to come out on October 21st, so it's not too far away. It's the second book in the series. The first book ends with a very dramatic cliffhanging event, so I think a lot of readers are like,
We'll want
when
to
is
stick
the
around
second?
for the second
Yes.
book, yeah.
And then I'm hoping to have the third book and complete the series about a year after that. So
Okay, awesome. And it's
October.
available on Amazon and
Yes, the book is available on Amazon. I also have a website if you want a signed author copy. Not that my signature, I have a very nice signature. I worked on it, but who cares,
Oh,
right?
just
I'm
wait,
nobody.
it'll grow and buy it. You, I guarantee
So
it.
the website is don'tcallmejupiter.com.
Okay.
And if you pre-order the second book, I'll sign it for you. I also have some really beautiful custom bookmarks featuring my sister's art, which I'll put in the book order for you as well. And I just appreciate the feedback, just knowing that the words are resonating with people. I was a notorious late bloomer. I had somebody say, gosh, I could relate to how nervous you felt taking showers in junior high. I was that person too. It was really difficult, but you made it so funny. Now I can laugh at myself. That really brings me a lot of joy, knowing that people are relating to it, connecting with it. So I think that's been my favorite part. Can I add just one more story?
Oh, no, by all means, by all means.
So one of the unexpected things that happened were like old college roommates got in touch and were like, oh, we're all going to read your book. And so I got to reconnect with some people I hadn't talked to much in the last 10 years. And just having a group Zoom call after they read the book and they wanted to ask me questions was fantastic. If you have a book club, I'm willing to chime in on a Zoom call and you can ask me any question you want. It's really kind of fun. It's interactive. And then the other thing I wanted to say that the very first call, my god sister Claire read the book, and I kind of make fun of a very mild speech impediment she had in the book because there's so much heavy drama going on. I felt like I needed some comedic relief, so I exaggerated it a little bit. And it's something she outgrew and she's still sensitive about as an adult. So she called me on the phone in tears and was like, how could you make me sound like that? And I'm like, you haven't read the second book yet. You don't know what happens to your character. And it's all good now, but it like made me realize that, oh, I got to be very sensitive about how I portray other people. I went for 100% honesty in the book with some exaggeration in some cases. But Claire and I are all good. And she's looking forward to reading the second book as well.
All righty. And Tom Bross's book currently out right now is Don't Call Me Jupiter. And sir, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you, Connor. This was a blast.
And thank you guys for joining in. Have a wonderful day.
What? You haven't been to the library lately? Stop in today and see that the library is more than books. Spokane County Library District facilities feature on-site technology, including Wi-Fi, computers, and printers, as well as free use of meeting rooms. The Library District offers events and programs for all ages, from story times to career development and employer classes to Social Security workshops. Our staff is well trained and happy to help. Find out more about your library at scld.org.
I was selling drugs. I was in and out of prisons. I didn't know how to read or write. I couldn't even read the sign at UGM that said, Hope Starts Here. Union Gospel Mission taught me to trust people. I have a job from learning to read. I never thought that I would find a community that would support me like UGM does. I am so grateful to God. Real change is possible. Union Gospel Mission.
Starting a digging project? Before you reach for the shovel, you must click callbeforeyoudig.org, alerting your local utility companies to come out and mark any lines they have near your dig site. Protect our buried utilities and click callbeforeyoudig.org.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's all from us. Tune in each Friday for more of The Pulse. We hope to see you soon, and until then, feel free to binge all of our content on YouTube or Facebook. Stay safe, and goodbye for now.